Today we're going to rebuild a VEM water union, and so we're going to go through the procedure for that. The kit, the rebuild kit, the link for that is below, so you can click on that. The rebuild kit has 2 lip seals in there, 2 bearings, 2 O-rings, and 2 snap rings. And there's also a link below to the seal driver, which really helps with the operation. It really helps to have a vise that you can hold the part in when you're rebuilding it. Make sure the vise has brass or aluminum protectors on the jaws so you don't damage the union or the union parts. So secure the union in the vise. Find a nice snap ring pliers and remove the bottom snap ring. Sometimes it may be a little tight, may take a little bit to get it loose, but once you get it popped out, and then pull the snap ring off the shaft and set aside. Then take the union and secure the shaft in the vise, and generally with a little bit of a tug, the housing will come off the shaft. Okay, then secure the shaft in the vise in vertical position. There's a little snap ring on the end of the shaft that needs to be removed with your snap ring pliers. Pull that off. Then there's a couple of small aluminum parts on the end here that need to be removed. Works best if you could take a little putty knife and pry them up off the bearing and up off the shaft. Remove those 2. Then there's a small O-ring underneath that needs to be removed before the bearings can come off. So pull that little O-ring off the shaft. Set that aside. And then the easiest way is just to lightly tap the shaft out of the bearings. Should come out fairly easy. If you have to use a small little shaft or socket or something to tap the shaft out, but real lightly. Set the shaft aside, and then the 2 bearings and the 2 spacers, 2 centers in between them. So that's everything off the shaft. Okay, now we're going to remove the rest of the parts out of the housing. So we put the housing back in the vise to secure that. And there's a small aluminum part that needs to come out with usually comes out pretty easy with hand. And then the seals need to come out. So either a small pick or a small screwdriver to work those out. Get the first seal out. Set that aside. Then there's a grease spacer, a plastic grease spacer in between. Pull that out. Just take note of what direction they go in, or refer to the detailed drawing. And then the second seal comes out. Sometimes they'll come out a little bit tough. Pull both of them apart. And now we'll go through and clean all the parts, wipe down everything that we're going to reuse and re-lube, and then also clean the shaft with some Scotch-Brite. At this point, if the shaft has damage from a bearing spinning or anything happening along those lines, then the union is not rebuildable. It will have to be replaced. But if every other components look good and they haven't gotten damaged, then we can certainly rebuild it. After I've cleaned all the parts, I'll lube them up with a light coat of some common grease. Anything that doesn't have to be a particular. We're going to put the seals back in the housing. So if you can secure that back into a vise. And then they use the seal driver and install the seal onto the end of the seal driver with the spring facing out. And that'll go down into the housing first with the spring down. And take a light maul, a little light, and just tap it down. Till it bottoms out. And then install your little grease spacer with the grooves pointing up. That goes in between the 2 seals. Set that down in there. And then again, the same with the second seal with the springs pointing out, and the spring will go down into the housing that way. So install those two, and then your small little labyrinth aluminum piece will go in with the grooves, kind of the castle pointing up. Slide that down into your housing till it's all the way seated down. Okay, should be loose, should just spin in there fairly easy. Remove your housing from the vise, and then we're going to install the bearings onto the shaft. Install the first bearing. It doesn't matter which direction the bearing goes on. They're equally the same both ways. Slide that over the end of the shaft and slide it all the way down. And then your inner spacer, put that on first. And then your outer spacer, slide that over the top. And then your second bearing. Occasionally they might be a little bit sticky. You may have to use the end of the lip seal driver is the same as that till you can get it started, and then slide that down. And then install your inner O-ring that goes on the shaft. Lube that up with some grease. And drop into its groove. And then the two aluminum parts, they should slide over the top of the O-ring and seal that up. And then install your small snap ring that goes onto your shaft. Slide that down, make sure it's in the groove. Everything should be nice and tight and snug. There should be no movement up and down on your bearings or your parts, and everything should be good to go. So now we can install this into the housing. So put the housing back into the vise. And everything was already pre-lubed. So we're just going to slide this back down real easily into the housing. And it should just a couple light taps to get it seated down all the way. Then take your exterior snap ring and your snap ring pliers and install that. Make sure that is seated down in the groove. Take a small screwdriver just to tap it down, make sure everything is in where it is. And you can pull it out, make sure everything turns nice and easy. Then there's the big O-ring that goes on to seal your water union. You can install that back onto the shaft. And then pump one pump of grease into the water union to lube the seals in the shaft and everything up, and then you should be ready to go to reuse this.